I think it's just kind of college. It's like going from your kid fantasy of like what you're supposed to do, what your parents tell you you're supposed to do, versus kind of figuring out that doesn't really sound that fun.
Yo, 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 what's up? Welcome to another episode of the Founder Podcast. Today, I have my good friend, JP Newman. JP is literally, and I know I said this about quite a few people, but literally one of the coolest human beings that I know. He is a real estate guru. He's done over $2 billion in transactions, currently has 3,000 doors in his portfolio. The guy is building a massive wealth fortune in the real estate business. And probably one of the things that attracted me most to JP the very first time that we met was his ability to understand tax and tax law and how to operate in the darkest gray possible, which, man, I love good tax strategy. Welcome to the show, Mr. JP.
Thank you, buddy. It sounds so sexy being the tax guy, but I have to say I do nerd out on those kind of things with you. It's pretty fun when you understand the chess game.
It is. It's a good time. So, yeah, the little background story. So JP and I met on a private island out in Croatia, of all places. This was what was it? April or May? No, June of 2022. So we've known each other for just about 14 months. Stayed in contact with JP just via text. I also invested in a fund that he's invested into. This mutual friend that we have that invests in a bunch of mom and pop, good, boring businesses. I've invested with him, but anyways, the story goes we were on this private island with this big group of entrepreneurs. I think there was 150 of us out there. You know, little old Mormon me, not drinking, not doing any of the crazy psychedelic stuff that all these guys were into. And me and JP kind of found each other on a dock, kind of like out around, and we started talking tax strategy. And I'm like, holy crap, this guy is amazing. I am always looking how to not pay the least amount of tax possible. Now, JP's not an accountant, and any advice that we talk about or even like discuss on this, don't even take it to the bank, but use it to your best discretion. What's up? So that's a little bit of our background. JP, dude, tell us your story. How old are you?
I am 56. I've been doing this for a year or two. I always say, so I got a lot of compliments this morning. Someone's like, how do you know so much? I'm like, well, you've a lot of successes and you get hit on the head a couple of times and hopefully you figure things out. So my first career was at Sony Pictures. I was a corporate guy, vice president of family entertainment, producing animation for Sony.
Let's rewind before that. So that's where you got into your career. Where did you grow up? What made JP tick? Like what kind of like childhood experiences that got you into these different things?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Los Angeles. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley during kind of a fun time. I mean, it was really a good childhood thing. And I have to say, when Robert Kiyosaki talks about Rich Dad, Poor Dad, my dad was always working, but the one thing my dad taught me at an early age, he was definitely taught me about entrepreneurship. And I remember being like 7 years old and literally like helping women take their bags out from the grocery store to the trunk and making like $3 tips. I'm learning how to like hustle those $3 tips. And then by 11 was like, he put me in a suit and I learned how to like sell my first things. I was selling calculators, those little calculators.
How much were you selling them for?
$10. I bought them for $5 and I was selling them for $10. I was making a $5 margin. I sold like 100 of them. So I made $500. I made like $500 at 11 years old. And I have to say, I think that and the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Who didn't want to be Ferris Bueller, right? Like I wanted that life. And so I think to this day, like my favorite day is the day I close a deal and everyone's making money, my investors. But if I'm on a ski slope and the thing closes and you get like a little call on your wireless headset, like, dude, it's in the bank. You're just like, that's a Ferris Bueller day. And my first taste of that was really in childhood. And I really credit my dad a lot for, I'll say, I had the personality to do it, but my dad really kind of forced me into some uncomfortable situations to figure it out.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Dude, let me tell you real quick about a cool Ferris Bueller experience I just had as far as like a deal closing
Yeah,
while just out playing. Did Daryl tell you about this deal that we're doing in Hawaii together?
he didn't. Tell me about it.
Oh, dude, we found the most beautiful Airbnb. It is literally on two and a half
Oh, he did.
acres.
He showed it to me. It's
Oh,
gorgeous. Oh my
oh my
God.
gosh.
Insane. Yes,
So
it's amazing.
amazing. So amazing. Yeah. So for those that don't know what it is, like we got this 2.5 acre location
Oh
that's
my
literally
God.
secluded, has a waterfall, a giant waterfall in the background. It's on the big island. This land where the house is where the king of Hawaii used to have his residence. And
Oh my gosh.
he sold this land in 18 like 65 to developers, but they maintained like this small at the end of this cul-de-sac. You literally are not around anybody. 3 bedroom, 3 bathroom, gorgeous spot for like, dude. Anyways, my Ferris Bueller experience was I was up at my lake house last week having a good time, or for the last couple of weeks having a good time with my family, and that's when we closed on the deal. When
Oh,
those deals,
congratulations.
when those deals happen and you're just like enjoying, like you said, you're on the ski slopes or you're on the boat or whatnot, it's a freaking, yeah, I love that you bring that up. So keep going with your story.
It
So
is. It's like the best day
you're
ever. By the way, if you need a third partner in that house, I've seen pictures of it, and I know you don't, but just in case you feel bad for me, I'm in.
nothing like a good.
Congratulations, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's awesome. So you're growing up, you're learning sales, you're flipping calculators, you're making money. Your dad's teaching you also to have a good time.
Yeah.
So continue there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was a pretty good kid as far as, got good grades, went to UCLA. I thought I was going to be a lawyer. So like, I thought I was going to get a law degree until I kind of woke up and realized that's just not who I am.
What what made
But
you
it was,
what made you wake up? Like what was like, okay, I don't want to be a lawyer. Like what changed?
I think it's just kind of college. It's like going from your kid fantasy of like what you're supposed to do, what your parents tell you you're supposed to do, versus kind of figuring out that doesn't really sound that fun. Hey, wait a second. And I really realized I started studying the LSATs to actually, I was, pre-law, I was going to go, graduate from UCLA. And I'm like, this doesn't seem very fun. This seems kind of dry. And if you haven't figured it out, I'm kind of a storyteller. And I think I started figuring out that my storytelling wasn't going to be a law. It was going to be, that's
Right.
why I produced films. And even this day, I think I'm a storyteller for real estate, which is kind of fun. And then my podcast as well. So it was
Visionary.
interesting. And I really try to, yeah, but what's been interesting is, and I talk about this a lot on my own podcast and to my kids. I've got, 2 boys, is that it didn't come easy for me. I was a late bloomer. I was not like hey, I found a 7-digit business at 26. Like that was not me at all. I must have failed 25 times, Chris. I mean, I failed so many times.
So
I did everything from working for a developer. I mean, you name it. Go
yeah,
ahead.
tell us about some of the failures. Like what things did you try that you just fell flat on your face, and give us a little more depth on that.
Well, I really wanted to. I think I wanted to be a real estate developer, but like the first guy who let me work for him for 16,000 a year, he tortured me. We were in the desert. We were in Palm Springs, and he made me an assistant superintendent, which is basically a grunt. He looked at me the first day and said, "Your hands are too shiny, UCLA boy." And he put me on a tractor at 5:30 in the morning with scorpions and snakes, and I had to deal with the contractors and fights and like being on the roof when it's 120 degrees and there's tar coming into your face. Like it was that kind of like. I
Right.
lasted about 8 months in that role. But um, I did a lot of things. And then I thought, maybe I'm being called more to entertainment. And there's just a lot of trial and error of just jobs that didn't work, sales jobs, just like sales jobs in boiler rooms. I just couldn't really find my spot. Like nothing was really particularly easy. Um, I think my big break was as I was getting better at just my own confidence. I think the job at Sony was a real big break for me. I had some experience uh,
So
in kind of children's.
what were you doing at
Yeah.
Sony? Like give us some details there.
So it was kind of a cool thing. After the real estate thing started failing, I kind of talked. I needed a job, so I went to work for a gift company like that made like stuffed Mickey Mouses and stuffed Power Rangers and like all these stuffed toys and animals. They were the biggest ones around, and I kind of wound up like as their guy who my job was to find the next hot trend or the next hot toy and go acquire it for them. So it was kind of a fun role. I had to go fly around, New York City and meet with all these inventors and figure out which movie was going to be the next big hot movie. And that's what I did. Kind of a quirky job, but I liked it. It kind of gave me the entertainment bug. So
how old were you at that time?
I was probably 26, 27.
Okay. Nice.
And didn't pay a lot, but it was kind of a fun. I liked it. It was the first moment that I think I had a spark of like, didn't like law, didn't like chasing scorpions and lights and that part of the development. I kind of figured out I wasn't going to be like the guy who's going to be physically on the site. Didn't even like, I learned a lot. And this was really the first job of like, there's some creativity. I get to kind of utilize my brain, high energy and put it all together. And then Sony came and I really was the dark horse. I should have never been working there because I had no entertainment experience. And they wanted someone to launch a family entertainment kind of division to compete against Disney. And they didn't exactly know what they wanted, but they certainly didn't want a guy without any experience in entertainment. I was definitely the long shot to be hired. And I think the guy who became my boss, who eventually became the chairman of the whole studio, by the way, he saw something in me. He just took a chance on me and said, I don't want to babysit you. I'm making big feature films. I don't have time to babysit you. I just need you to I want you to create a $150 million library for Sony Pictures in the next 2 years. Can you do that? I'm like, sure, I can do that. And of course, I said that with really no evidence that I could. But, you would do the same thing, Chris, right? Yeah, sure, I can do that.
Yeah.
and it was a magical
I always say, man, especially in those early ages, just say yes and then figure it out. Like, I actually had an experience where I was thinking about starting a search engine optimization company, and I went down and I was talking to a guy that needed search optimization, and I was like, "Oh, I have a company." He's like, "Oh, will you do this for me?" I'm like, yeah. And so then my flight back home, I was like researching how to get this thing off the ground so that I could make an offer for him. It was pretty funny. So that's definitely say.
I'll tell you, here's I don't usually talk about this, but the funny thing was they fly me to France for my first trade show. I'm going I'm going to Cannes. I'm in this fancy television thing. And there's this person next to me I bump into and they say, hey, I'm acquiring family for Sony Pictures, not Sony, for Sony as well. And I'm like, wait a second, they just hired me. What would you be doing here? So it turns out that Sony had Sony Music and Sony Pictures. I worked for Sony Pictures. And then there was Sony Music. And a big corporation is so large. So it turns out that the studio chairman of Sony Pictures wanted to show the guy at Sony Music. It's like two large guys. Who was better? So I was like the poker chip. But they didn't tell me the game. So I'm now competing against Sony Music and I'm Sony Pictures.
And you don't know what you're doing.
My muscle for this guy. No.
That's
it was cool. It was a wonderful experience. I was the youngest vice president out of 400 people, and they really left me alone, and mostly, which was great because I got to produce some great things.
At what point? How long did it take you to get there?
Started as director. 3 years.
Wow.
3 years.
I mean, so
it was
fill that
cool.
in though. How do you go from not knowing what you're doing to becoming a VP? Because there's a lot of listeners that got that question. Like, dude, come on, you don't just start knowing nothing and become the VP. Like, what were some key points that made you the big swinger?
I think the results were I was acquiring at a rapid fire rate, and my projects were working and making them money, and so. My boss said to me, I really would like to fire you. Half the time I really just want to fire you because you're a giant pain in my ass because you're insistent. Like you see something and you won't let go of it. Like you're like a dog until I say yes. You just won't say no. He says, but I have to promote you to vice president because you just keep making so much, you keep doing so well, making so much money for this division that in spite that you could annoy the shit out of me, I have to promote you. So that was kind of the relationship we had.
So I think you bring up such a solid point that the characteristic of being a dog, right? Like the one that can just go and make it happen, no matter how smooth, no matter how much people love you, right? Like if you can just make crap happen, you're going to be able to be promoted, be an incredible entrepreneur, whatever. And it just seems like so many people lack that.
I'll tell you a funny story on that. Do you remember there was a series, Chris, you probably were growing up, called Veggie Tales? Do you remember this Veggie
Oh
Tales?
yeah, I know Veggie Tales.
It was So when Phil created Veggie Tales, I was like I was at a Christian like marketplace, and these Bob and Larry characters pop up, right? And I'm there, and I'm like, this is going to be huge. And no one had spoken to Phil, the creator, at this point about what this was going to be. But I knew I knew this guy had something special. I've been looking at people had pitched me thousands of ideas, so
Right.
I was the guy you'd pitch your idea for your next family thing. And so I bring Phil, I fly him out to Sony Pictures. He had never been to a movie studio. So he's praying in the commissary. So you've got all these movie stars around you and studio executives, and he's praying in the commissary, which was pretty funny. And I knew he was going to be a winner. But as soon as he prayed, and he also wore Larry and Bob golf pants. So he looked like, everyone's in Giorgio Armani. And then there's Phil wearing his Veggie Tales clothes. And nobody got it. Nobody understood. And I'm like, let's acquire this. It's going to be huge. We're going to make toys. We're going to do the whole thing. And I finally told my boss, which I don't think most people do. I said to my boss, look, I know this is going to work. And if I'm wrong, you can reduce my pay from my my low 6-digit salary. I'll just make minimum wage. I'll take minimum wage for a year. I'll just work for 1 year free for minimum wage.
Wow.
But if I'm right, you're going to triple my salary, and you're going to do it. And they still passed, by the way, and it became huge. And the president of Sony Pictures would always tell the story about I was the only guy who had the balls to actually put my job on the line.
That is so awesome
for a project.
So I think what you're sharing right here is like so valuable, especially for somebody that's sitting in an employment role, doesn't own a business, isn't a founder, isn't running, the big organization. Like, you can still be an entrepreneur under through an employment, and the fact that you were willing to take that risk and put your balls on the line and say, look, this one I believe in, I got the stamp of approval. One, not only does it show how committed you are, but like after that point, you're going to bust your butt to make sure it works. And two, I mean, you negotiated triple your pay. Freaking that's awesome. Nobody gets triple their pay in the employment world. And so congratulations. That's awesome.
It's a good, I'll tell you what I learned from the corporate experience that to this day though, is that I was the guy, like most people in corporate America, you got to please, like, instead of let's say A to B is the fastest route. Well, that's not always the fastest route in corporate America when you're employed. It's like A kissing butt to B. So B signs off and tells D that this is a good idea. And then it gets to F. And then all of a sudden, and I've always been the guy who just goes to A to B. And to this day, for my own company, I have a short span of patience and attention. So I just want to get from here to here. I can tell you it's not always the best strategy in corporate America, because you're not, sometimes you got to be a little more diplomatic, where I took more of the cow in a China bowl shop approach to it. But I got promoted and I produced them, but I delivered my promise of larger. We did, at the time we were doing Dragon Tales, Bear in the Big Blue House. I produced 5 best-selling books, Where the Red Fern Grows, Trumpet of the Swan. We did some really, really, we did a heavy metal adult animated show. We did some really, really cool things that I was really proud of. So at the end of the day, I might not have been the most diplomatic, but we got things done.
So you're working for Sony. You're doing all these things. Like you're winning in corporate America, right? As an employee, it's definitely a cool thing.
Yeah.
What was next? At what point did you decide, no more corporate America, I'm going to go and do this on my own? Or were you kind of doing side hustle along the way and then launched into doing your own thing? Like where was that? Fill in the gaps there.
Yeah. So, I kind of knew that I had a dream of financial freedom, and I knew that at Sony, it was going to always be a great, fun job, but it wasn't going to be the path to financial freedom. So I started getting antsy. This is the theme of me. I'm just impatient a lot. And for better or worse, it's just part of my personality. Yeah. And so I kind of did a side hustle. Here I am, a vice president. And then I created a website and a whole new business. And I was flying to New York and taking my time on the weekends and doing all this crazy stuff. But I ultimately knew after 5.5 years, I kind of did everything I needed to do there. I took the jump out.
So what was the
I
side
actually produced
hustle?
my
You
last thing I
can
did is I produced
you
my
got
own.
to tell us what the side hustle is.
Okay, you want the side? The side hustle actually became a pretty large company, but it wasn't mine. It was the early day of online commerce, and I really saw that nobody, the big retailers, were not aggregating gift registry yet, and I knew that whoever figured out how to aggregate gift registry first would win. And I was pretty early on in that days. It actually, the biggest one right now is like Wedding Channel. If you have to buy a gift, you can order a Wedding Channel. But I was actually about 3 years early, which was another lesson for me. I hit it early, and I got to every CEO. I mean, here I am making appointments on a Thursday. I'd get to every CEO. I'd show them this, and you know what they said to me? We don't think that online internet commerce is ever going to be viable. We don't see how you'll ever get past the security hurdles of online commerce.
Wow.
So it just shows you that I was too early. I was too early, and it just shows you how timing really is everything. Here's the crazy part, Chris. My last job I took, they hired me. The company that won 3 years later hired me because they knew I was the only guy out there who had actually thought of this, and they gave me a bunch of stock options to be their head of sales and fly around the world and get them all those stores.
Oh, wow.
And then the internet bubble crashed, and my $100 million plus, being 30, and I wanted to be worth $100 million at 30 in stock options. Well, they all were worth about that much after everything crashed. Now they did bounce, and they're still open today, so they didn't fail. But when I quit Sony, that company was on the cover of Time magazine as the most promising internet company. Like, that's how confident I felt.
Wow. Hold on. So you have these stock options. They're worth potentially $100 million or whatnot. And so you're 30, you're thinking you're on top of the world. You're like, dude, I'm unstoppable. Everything I touch turns to gold. Might as well call me Midas, baby. And so you're sitting there, and then it goes to zero. Walk us through your feelings.
And they fire me.
Dude,
well, they laid me off.
Walk us through your feelings right there. Like legit, what was going on in your head?
It was very strange because it was very political who got fired and who got to stay. And I was from the LA entertainment crew, and this was a job. This was like the San Francisco tech crew. I always say it was like there's Kleiner Perkins, the largest venture firm, and there's Sony Pictures. And they called me Mr. Hollywood. I was the guy who wore Armani while they were all in Banana Republic, if you know what I'm saying. So I think part of it felt really personal. I'd worked my ass off. I was delivering. Once again, I felt like I was delivering the goods. I delivered them all these major retailers. I was flying around the world. So I think I was a little disillusioned, if you want to, maybe sad and maybe disillusioned, because I knew I had produced, and I felt like I was being penalized for not producing. And I felt like it was, again, political. It became kind of a fraternity sorority situation. So it was a little bit of a blow. I changed my life. I had left Sony, which was a big risk, moved to San Francisco to go work for this company. So it was definitely disappointing. And I didn't know what to do next, quite frankly. I was like, okay, this isn't like being a vice president at Sony. This is a failed internet startup. My resume, I'm not as shiny now. I'm 31. I'm not 26. I'm not Wonder Kid anymore. Like, what am I going to do next?
What's your net worth at this point? Is it zero? Have you spent everything you made? Do you have any assets, anything like that?
No, I mean, nothing enough to barely pay rent. I mean, I bought a used Infiniti. For $6,000, I bought a car. I was in a kind of a shitty apartment, and it's like, dude, what happened to me, man? I've been working my butt off, and all of a sudden, I got friends that are in their 20s, they're rich, or they've got good corporate jobs, and they're married, and they got kids. And I'm like this 31, 32.
You're like, I should have been a lawyer. I should have stuck to being a lawyer.
Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah. It was very, very humbling and depressing, to be honest, because I felt really like I compared myself to others, and I felt like a failure probably at that point. I just didn't have much to show for it. And I had worked so hard, and I knew I was good. And I think that's the one thing that kept me going, Chris, was that like when people say, why'd you keep going and not just settle and take a job? It's like, I did believe in myself, although I didn't have the evidence to show you, but I kind of did. I just kept doing it for other people. And then I felt like I was at their political whims. In the end, in both Sony and that last job, it's like how much I produced in the end almost didn't matter versus how much I was perceived or liked by the right person in charge. And that person would always change. Like the person who hired me wasn't the person who even was my boss in the end. So I'm always like, back to that A to B, it's like, if I do something, I should be rewarded. And I realize in this system that that's not what's going to be happening for me.
I want to go back. You brought up a strong point that, like, at this point in your life, right, you felt like a failure because of comparison, right? You're looking at yourself like, look at all my friends, they're doing X, I could have done this, right? Like it's this analyzation of comparing. And whenever we look at anything in life that way, we're either overly satisfied or overly depressed, right? Like if we're right, we're looking at, well, at least I don't have it as bad as this person, and so then you become overly satisfied and you don't hit your potential. Or it's, man, I wish I was doing what this person was, so then you become unmotivated. But the interesting thing is, like, each one of us have a completely different path. Like, your path to get to your success is yours. It's not it's not Chris Lee's, it's not Grant Cardone's, it's not anybody else. It's yours. And I think it's so important that we each own our own path and understand that the ups and the downs, they're all there for us. Like we need all of it in order to get.
We do.
So thanks for like kind of digging into that, like kind of the emotion and whatnot. And so you're at this point, you understand, like, you got to get stuff from A to B. What's next? What happens next, Mr. JP?
Well, I really had a hard moment because I was really kind of lost, to be honest, Chris. At this point, I'm like, okay, what do I do? And the one thing that kept coming back to me is I don't want to go back to work for somebody, because I realized I wanted to control my future and I wanted to control my destiny, that if I produced, that I would collect on it. And so what I realized was, when you're in the studio system, or when you work for a venture capital firm, you work for someone and they control. Like, I got to get Sony to approve, or if I even make a film, because in the end, I made a pretty well-known film called Where the Red Fern Grows with Dave Matthews and Alison Krauss.
That was your film?
I produced it. And so,
dude, hold on. Did you guys hear that? This guy's a big deal. Yeah, we thought we were talking to, just some chump here, but dude, Where the Red Fern Grows, dude, that was like classic from when I was a kid.
Yeah, it's something I'm really proud of, actually. It's something I'm really, really proud of producing. But I had to get Disney to say yes, and I had to get Dave Matthews and Alison Krauss. I had to get like a lot of people to say yes and get that film made. And in the end, quite frankly, the financer took all the credit and got most of the profit. So
usually
that was the last thing I did. And I'm like, you know what? I'm done with that. Like, I'm done of working for making other people successful. Right. And I kind of got on my hands and my knees. And like, my dad was in the real estate business, but he was retired. He had kind of closed up his office, and he wasn't a huge syndicator, but he was a good one. And he was always smart. And I was an investor since I was 7 years old. He'd put me little money in deals and just teach me how to think like it. And I asked him, would you train me for a year? But Chris, if you can imagine, I had to go back. He had no office. I was back in my childhood bedroom. He had converted my childhood bedroom into a home office. So here I go, being an executive at Sony with a balcony and an assistant and a huge office, and being a vice president, traveling the world. And now I am dialing for dollars and learning real estate in a second career in my childhood bedroom.
Like, you're living at home?
Humble pie.
Oh,
I'm not living at home. I'm not living at home.
Basically,
I'm working out of my. Yeah. I'm commuting to my childhood bedroom, right? But what was it? And it was a really difficult time. And again, I realized, but to my dad's credit, I spent 1 year with him just learning the basics of how to build an investment business, how to bring investors in. And then I really think one of the greatest values I got from my dad is, you obviously can see like someone's strengths and weaknesses. I think that on his strength side, I always saw his integrity with the investors. Like, he would always be willing to lose his dollar before an investor loses their dollar. And that integrity was, like, I'd say it's a lifelong lesson that I take today with every investor. I will be the one, whether I tell them or not, I will be the one to take the bullet when I can, when it's reasonable and fair. I can't do it all the time, but without even telling them, sometimes we just take the bullet, because that's what a fiduciary does. And that definitely came directly from my lessons from my father.
That's
So
a great lesson.
I, yeah, and that was really great. And something I'm really, my dad's 85. He's still alive. He still likes to chase single family fix and flip. So it's cool that we still get to talk about this stuff and, and all that stuff. Um, so literally raised money, $25,000, $50,000 at a time. They had little small deals, little shitty apartment buildings and really shitty, like when I say shitty markets, and this was a lesson I had to learn. So I was starting to buy apartment buildings, small ones, but the cap rates were like 12 caps, man. It was like because
Oh
I was
yeah.
buying in like Louisiana
Right.
and, like, and it turned out to be really good. It really got my career going. What I realized though is like when you're buying an 11 cap at that time, there was a reason why you're buying an 11 cap. My rents were, $500 rents, $600 rents. I remember I said to my dad, there's something, what is that on the floor over there? And he's like, I don't know. I asked the manager. They're like, that's a heroin needle. I mean, it was bad. I mean, it was really, really bad the first things that we did. And I learned a lesson though. And we did make money because you can imagine at a 13 cap, we were able to, turn these at 10 caps. And we actually did my first real monies in real estate came on those early deals. But I
Mhm.
also made a decision that I would never do real estate in markets that didn't give me energy. Because I'd go there and work on these properties and get updates, and I'd feel like my energy was like shot, and like it took everything out of me, and because it was depressing, and for me it was, at least it wasn't my thing. And so my rule to this day is only invest in markets and things that interest me personally, that serve humanity, or markets that I want to be in, or pass. I don't care if it's a good deal. There's too many good things to do out there. So that lesson that I took from that, I still use to this day of the markets that I invest in.
Dude, that's such a strong point. How will you measure your life talks about how there's hygiene factors and there's motivational factors, right? Hygiene factors are money, oxygen, like things just to survive. But once you're past that, you need something else that pushes you. It's not just about the money. It's not just about the return or whatnot. And the fact that you've identified that your real motivating factor is like, does it give me energy? Am I excited about it? And a lot of people don't realize this that haven't experienced success, but like once you've experienced success, you realize quickly. Like I love the quote from Naval. Naval is a great like modern day philosopher, and he says the best thing
Yeah, I know Naval.
anybody can do is get rich as fast as possible, for then they will realize that that's what world is not all about, right? Like once you have money, you realize that's not what it's all about. It's about what you're talking about. It's about doing deals with great people, doing deals that just make sense, bring energy, that are exciting, that are fun and team building. Like
Yeah,
that right there, ladies and gentlemen, is a secret nugget that Mr. JP just shared with us. I appreciate that.
it's true. It's true. And you think about it, I was storytelling at Sony, but you probably know this. Like now I get to story tell again. Like I love my deals. Like when I'm talking to an investor, I think that one of our reasons why we're successful is because I really love the story of not just the apartment building. Why is the market expanding? Like, oh, like I have a deal right now where I'm building 629 units. I'm going to be the closest apartment building to the new Tesla plant in Austin, Texas.
Let's
I know where those workers are
go.
coming in, and I've got that deal, right? That's my deal,
Yes,
and
sir.
I know it's like, so it's like Sim City. I know I see all the farmland turning over right now. I see the pipes being installed. I know how big those pipes are and how much water they're going to bring in, how much electricity. I know how many people are coming, and I've got that deal, and I'm going to hold on
That's
to
so
that
cool.
deal. So like it's like a different kind of storytelling, but as you can tell, I've got a lot of passion for it. So to tell good stories, you have to be really excited, and I can only be excited on things that really excite me, not just to try to sell you, but things that really bring me passion and that I have strong conviction for. So areas that I love, stories that just make sense. It's like about growth, and growth that you can really get behind because it's good growth. It's like pro community growth. It's good for America. It's good for workers. It's good for people.
Love
It's
it.
like you're part of something bigger that's good. That all is like the base of my energy when I look at deals.
So over the years, you've done all kinds of really cool deals. Two questions: one, what's the biggest deal that you've ever done? And two, what is the most amount of cash that you've ever raised from one investor?
No, that's good. So the biggest deal I did was a pretty ballsy deal. There was these 4 apartment buildings. There was about 850 units in Dallas, Texas, and an area in Dallas, Texas that was not doing particularly well. And these buildings were like in foreclosure. So there was like, it was ridden with crime and gangs, and nobody would buy these buildings at any price because they're like, you can never turn these around. Right. And so they should have been worth 80, 90, 100 million, but nobody wanted to buy them. So we bought them for much, 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 much less.
What did you
and
get
I think
them
a lot
for?
of people thought we were suckers when we bought
What
them.
did you get them for? How much? Come on, you got to give us the details. This is all about details.
We'll just say less than 40 million. How about that?
Oh,
right?
Come on, JP. Give us
because
the
somebody had to buy somebody. I actually don't remember offhand, but it was around 40 million. It might have been 38 or 42, something like that.
Awesome.
But the point was, even now imagine during the 30 days when you're doing your diligence, like during the diligence period, there was 3 murders on the property during due diligence. Like
what?
The gangs were so bad there. There was like,
what?
I've never been in a property where like, and then we had the vision, we had this audacious vision that we were going to clean all the gangs out, make this a great thing for the community. We believe the community, this was the worst problem child in the entire community. Like the community was getting better, and this was the problem child. And nobody had the courage to go in there because they said you can't turn it around. And I'll just tell you, in the end, we sold it for over 100 million.
And
it took a lot of work.
I love that.
The investors were happy. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So question 2, what's the most money?
Awesome. Yeah.
What's the most money you've raised for a deal from a single investor?
From a single investor, I'm going to say 5 to 10 million. I don't know the exact number, somewhere between 5 and 10 million. Most of my investors are accredited investors, and they're putting somewhere typically between 250 and $1.5 million with me. I've got a lot of investors, and so I would say even my wealthy ones, like the ones that have higher balances with me, they like to put 2 million here, 2 million in the next one, 2 million in the next one. So I still haven't gotten to those checks. I would like to. Actually, my next aspiration in this next cycle is to have what I call my 5 anchors, that I can count on them between $5 and $20 million for every deal that I do, because I believe in the next cycle, it's going to take more and more equity to get these deals done. So actually right now I'm kind of marketing and building my sales team to kind of target to make sure we have a few more of those anchors.
Makes sense.
Just for that reason.
Yeah. That's so cool. So, dude, what drives you now? You've had all this success. You're married. You're 56 years old. I can't remember. You have kids?
2 boys.
Okay.
In high school.
So awesome. 2 boys. So tell me, like, what drives you? What motivates you? What gets you out of bed every single day right now?
I'm driven by a ferocious curiosity about the world and about people. And like Chris, even with you and I think this is like when you and I were nerding out in Croatia, I was having fun with the conversation, but I was incredibly electrified by our conversation because I was curious about you and what you stand for and what you're about. And as you know, your partner, Daryl, flew out to see me. So a year later, after not hearing from you guys, I get a call from your partner, and he calls me and says, I'm going to come to Austin. I got a couple of things I want to chat with you about. I could use just some advice. I call it second summit advice. You know, Chip Conley talks about your first summit is wealth accumulation, and hopefully your second summit is servant leadership, wealth preservation, servant leadership, stuff like that. So what gets me out of bed are those things. It's mentorship. It's servant leadership. I still like making money. It's super fun. But now with making money, I'm really passionate about making sure the money being made is really having impact and conscious capitalism, like for everyone, that every stakeholder in the chain is benefiting, whether I'm investing in someone else's deal or doing my own deals. I really being more and more conscientious. Is this action not only a return, but is everybody benefiting? Because I think sometimes by accident, capitalism can be very extractive because we don't mean to, but for someone to win, someone has to lose, right? Like there's this feeling like, you know, I'm not saying it has to be. I'm just saying a lot of times, like sometimes it could be the cost of the tenant. Are we raising rents? Are we scorching the earth? Like what are we doing in order to make this return? And I think that in this, what I'd call the second summit part. It's much more about really being clear. Like for me at this point, for Thrive FP, which is my company, Thrive FP, for purpose, for profit. So we are a for-profit syndication private equity company, but the purpose has to be in there too. And for me, doing apartments for our workforce, for America's, policemen, firemen, teachers, I really want to make sure that my investors are doing well, but I really want to make sure that the residents in my communities are also doing well. Are we really living up to the promise through our actions of taking good care of these people, because it's their home? It's right. Where they spend the most amount of time. And so that's where I spend a lot of my energy, and that's what gets me out of bed these days.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Now let's shift gears. I'm sure listeners, since I introduced you as a tax guru, well, we gotta talk some tax strategy. What are your favorite super gray tax strategies? Not black. We ain't going into black, but what are like just some good ones that people just never think about?
Well, first of all, I don't like to use the word gray. In fact, I had a great conversation with Tom Wheelwright. Tom Wheelwright's my accountant. A lot of people know he's Robert Kiyosaki's accountant. And I pay my taxes. The one thing I wanted to spell a thing about is that a lot of real estate guys show up in their fancy cars and they're saying, I pay zero taxes. It is possible. I'm not saying it's impossible to pay zero taxes. I don't know if I can be humble. Many people who know taxes better than I do. I could try to force a zero tax or even a lower taxing, but there's right. A couple of reasons why I don't. The strategy doesn't match up with my life and what I need and what I want to do. It's like, right. Who's wagging the tail? Is it like my lifestyle, or is it my tax plan that's wagging the tail of how I want to live? I want cash now. I don't want to defer everything. Right. I also am an American. I don't mind paying some taxes. I feel like this country is giving me like an incredible
Absolutely.
thing. I'm actually honored that I get to pay some taxes. I just want to pay what's fair and reasonable, and that works with my life. So that
being said, what are your favorite strategies?
Well, I'll just tell you. I'll tell you what I'm doing right now. Like, this is like my 3 strategies as we speak. So I'm investing as we speak into 2 different solar projects. So I'm doing, with the America's green policy and these new tax credits, there's some incredible opportunities within our tax code right now because the government wants to incentivize us to go green. And I share those values of wanting to go green. I want beautiful lakes and all that. And when you invest in the right solar projects, the depreciation that you get to take from your investment year 1 is absolutely insane. And then it's just like this steep depreciation curve. And then you still have an investment behind it. So right now, as we speak, I'm doing my year-end planning, and I will invest with this great group that I really trust. It's a large family office. I got to know them in Egypt. I was in the middle of the desert, going 100 miles an hour in a Land Cruiser with this guy. He had a hugely successful business, a famous company. I don't know if I should mention it. It doesn't matter. But anyways, in the middle of going 100 miles an hour in the deserts of Egypt, he's like, "You should do what I'm doing. This is how I manage my family office." And I'm like, "That is fucking rad." Excuse my language. You may have to take that F-bomb out. But so right now, as we speak, solar, I think right now with what President Biden has done is a great opportunity that we should all Americans, we should get behind. It's remember, don't feel bad. It's what the government wants you to do. The government wants you to go green. So I want to invest in solar. I'm all for it. And
it's literally called the investment tax credit. Like, they want to incentivize investment into green energy. So here you go. Plus you get depreciation. Plus you get all these incredible things. So yeah.
Which is why I don't call it gray. I'm just being a good citizen and doing what the government wants me to do. They're incentivizing me to do it. I want to do my part. Right. Right now, as we speak, I just invested in an opportunity zone fund from this amazing group, multi-billion-dollar group. But again, these are all friends. What I'm learning is I'd rather invest with friends. So I met that guy in Egypt. This guy, he's in my business partner's there's a group called Tiger 21, which is a kind of a high-end mastermind. And so we met him there. He runs a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and we're doing OZ. We're doing OZ basically. Through him right now. And I got another opportunity zone project. For those who don't know, it's a way that you can defer if you have a current real estate deal or a current tax gain, from real estate, you can defer it for a couple of years. And then ultimately, after you defer it, the next project you go in is tax free. So you defer your taxes on this one, which gives you more net present dollars if you want to nerd out.
Right.
And then you can go to a zero basis on taxes over a 10-year period. So I actually have several of those right now. And then, of course, I think there's various kinds of insurance, very couple of that really great insurance strategies, which I won't bore you guys on the details. And those are probably my three favorite strategies.
You gotta bore us a little bit on one insurance. Just give us one quick 2-minute explanation of an insurance strategy.
Well, I think that, the IRS realizes, especially if you're an entrepreneur, that there are certain insurances that are either don't exist in the marketplace or are very prohibitively expensive for you as an entrepreneur to run your business. So there's a tax code that talks about this thing called captive insurance, which is you literally can create your own insurance company to insure risk with other people in a shared risk pool, other entrepreneurs in a shared risk pool. If it's an easy risk or if it's a very insurable or cheap risk, you won't qualify for captive. But if your business truly has a risk in it that is just, again, not easily insurable, that's really where captive insurance can be a great way. And it's legitimate insurance, by the way. That's the great thing about it is, it's insurance that I really count on. And I share my risk with another 35 entrepreneurs. I'm mostly responsible, but we all share this risk together. I share their risk too. But putting in the shared risk pool, it brings me confidence that I've got the right insurance for my company. And it has some amazing tax benefits to it, potentially, depending on how many times you use the policy and what you need the policy for. So there's no guarantees, but hopefully it incentivizes all these business owners to run really good businesses. You don't want to have unnecessary claims. It works against you. Right. In the long run. So it can be a win-win. And it's, again, the government recognizes, and the government's supporting small business and medium-sized business with these captives. And it's been incredibly valuable for my business and as a tax strategy.
Very cool. What is the best place to find more information from you, JP? Like your podcast, social media, like where are the best spots to find you?
Yeah. So for my business, if anybody wants to know more about what I do on the real estate syndication side, it would be Thrive FP, like Frank Peter for profit.com. If you want to know more of the more social impact side, my podcast is Investing on Purpose. And that would be at Investing on Purpose through all the major handles like Instagram and YouTube and what have you. And the show really is basically the double bottom line. It's just using all these stories we've been telling, Chris, like how do you use your most creative mind to create the highest profitability and the highest purpose and sustainability in the same business? And basically, how can you outperform your competitors by simply doing the right thing? And I interview a bunch of CEOs and business thought leaders about that. And that's what my podcast is about. So those are my two jams.
Awesome. Yeah. Few more questions for you, JP. If you could go back to 21-year-old JP, what would you tell him to do different?
I would tell him to enjoy the journey more and have faith in myself. Like have faith it's all going to work out in spite of the evidence not looking too certain at moments. I guess I would say give myself a little more grace.
Yeah, very cool.
I think it's hard. I think, go ahead.
Keep going.
No, I was just going to say, I think there's so much pressure from the world. I watch my kids at 16 in high school, and I'm watching them on their TikTok and their Instagrams, and everyone's got this 30-second clip about how rich they are and how they made it and they're the man, and I think that I just feel like we have put so much pressure on people that their value is around money. And you just said it, what you said is, earlier is exactly true. Money's awesome. It provides these lifestyles that we get to go to Croatia and meet each other, great human beings. At the end of the day, if you don't have your happiness, your peace, your joy, which is going to come from who you are and your character and what you're about, what you stand for, and everything that actually matters, the rest of it really doesn't matter without that joy. So I think the grace comes from not only saying, hey, slow down, it'll all work out, whatever that means. But if we all could just take a breather here for a minute and say, it's not all about money. Like You're okay. You matter. You belong just because you're you. And enjoy the ride a little bit more. It's great to be ambitious, but like enjoy the ride. That's what I would say.
I love that. I love that. JP, I know you're an avid traveler. Where are some of your
Yes.
favorite? I know where are some of your favorite places to go? Places that you would recommend? Maybe stuff that isn't well known through Instagram or whatnot. Like where do you love to go?
Well, I've had I have traveled quite a bit. I have to say, going to Egypt down the Nile, and actually, I didn't think the pyramids would be that cool and all these holy temples would be that cool. But when I just got back like 60 days ago, but when you actually go and experience going down the Nile River, the Fertile Crescent, where basically man came from, and you see these buildings and you see these hieroglyphics that they're either 5, 10, or 15,000 years old. The truth is no one exactly knows if it's, but it doesn't make sense. It breaks the whole story of humanity because it doesn't match anything I've ever seen anywhere. It doesn't match Greece. It doesn't, what I've seen in Jordan, what I've seen in Israel, the dates, like the stuff you see in Israel or Jordan is like 2 or 3 thousand years old, but the stuff in Egypt's like 10,000 years old, and it looks a lot newer. It looks newer than some of the things you see today. So
Right.
I think just to be mind blown and having a reverence for how intelligent whatever we were in the past was, I think there's nothing like Egypt to experience that. And then I would say to you, um, going to Africa, being in the bush in Africa and watching the animals migrate and like really being out in the bush, um, there's so few places left on Earth where it really is a healthy ecosystem of gorgeous animals that can actually eat us. Like we're not the apex predator. And there's definitely moments you're just like, I'm just in this fishbowl with everyone else. I am not the apex predator in this was a really, really humbling experience and gave me a great, respect and love, not just for the environment, but just for whatever you want to call the great man, the God, the spirit, whoever created all this. It's just the diversity and the beauty of what we have is just, don't know that I've seen that kind of beauty before anywhere else. And the last thing I would tell you, if somebody had a chance to go to Japan, um, particularly Kyoto, which is one of the only few cities besides Jerusalem, it's over 3,000 years old and it's still a working city today. And when you walk through the city, the reverence, the soul, the spirit, the history, the artistry, the love it's all still, you're not walking into a museum and you're not going to Disney. You're getting like a real piece of beauty. And unlike the pyramids that are now been this great mystery of a civilization we don't really understand, these are the same people. These are the ancestors that are living there today
Right.
that have passed the generation on and on and on with such beauty in a way that I can't explain, but it just brings me so much awe and reverence, for the Japanese people.
It really is amazing what the Japanese have been able to establish. I I believe it's Japan where it's like there's a family owned business that has lasted like 30 generations or something, which is like I
Yeah.
think the longest family business in the world or something crazy. But yeah, it's yeah, yeah, absolutely amazing what the culture that they've created. Thank you for sharing those places. That's awesome. Last question.
Yeah.
1 to 2 books that you would recommend that maybe have changed your life or something you're reading right now that would be great for the listeners.
Well, I think the one that's to this day, and the big one that was, I think Sapiens for me was a big, like, I feel like Sapiens is the one book that finally, because I'm being curious, I know so much about the world, but Sapiens kind of was the glue for me of how all these pieces fit together of why, when you have these days, you're like, oh, mankind is so retarded, or what are humans doing politically, or what are we doing to this world? Sapiens kind of explains it all. We're really retarded and beautiful creatures at the same time. But
Absolutely.
when you understand our background in a way, I get really frustrated, but I have a tremendous amount of compassion for our species. We're doing the best, man. We just separated from the apes not that long ago. We're figuring it out. And then a recent book that I got actually came from a baby bathwater member that I'm really enjoying is Built to Move just came out, and it's from the people who started CrossFit. And I don't know how much you know about functional fitness. You probably do because you're a fitness guy. But this idea, and I can tell you as you get a little bit older, this idea of not just, for me, longevity. We talk about, you know, health span over lifespan. Like, what's your health span? And this book really goes a lot into people think it says stretching is not good for you, even like people stretch or they do yoga. So to really understand a new way of how best to keep your muscles strong, to keep yourself flexible, keep yourself moving so you don't become a hunched over old person and you really like are always snap off. Can you snap off the floor? Can you do the functional movements? And I think this book does a great job of giving you 10-minute, very practical things you can do every day to keep your body agile, young, and really healthy. So that's a book that I recently read that I'm enjoying.
Very cool. Thanks for those recommendations, JP. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's extremely valuable. You got a lot going on.
You're welcome.
I've been trying to chase you down, I think, for 2 months to get you on this. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to make this happen. Until next time.